who's going to do inquiry? There's a style of speaking in Neo-Advaita circles that would suggest that because you don't know the answer to that question, or because you can't find an answer to that question, or because there is no answer to that question, inquiry is useless, or only the seeker can do an inquiry, and the seeker can never find what it wants. This is a misunderstanding. First of all, it already assumes a certain paradigm that the structure or entity called self is either there or it's not, which is a sort of roundabout way of asserting self. You don't actually have to know the answer to the question, who's inquiring, for inquiry to work. Now, if that question is asked in the right context, it can actually be a valuable pointer to how inquiry functions. If you think you're inquiring, great. Look back and see who it is that feels like they're doing the inquiry. And rest there. Stop there when you don't find anything. That is inquiry. That's one form of inquiry. But to conclude that because you can't find the inquirer, inquiry is not valuable, or it just perpetuates the sense of a seeker, that's incorrect. It's an incorrect understanding of inquiry and the function of it. Moreover, it's a misunderstanding of the nature of relative and absolute. To always speak from an absolute perspective, there's no seeker, there's no practitioner, there's no one that can do anything. That is a very subtle fixation, but it's a fixation nonetheless. Because it's perfectly fine to talk from the standpoint of a self when the illusion of self is thoroughly dissolved. It doesn't matter. You can talk about self, you can talk about Santa Claus, you can talk about anything. It doesn't change the nature of reality. So to get stuck in an absolute position of non-doing is a total misunderstanding of non-agency. It's a misunderstanding of non-doership. The experience of non-doership is total, unequivocal. So you don't need to accentuate it. You don't need to talk about it. Just because there's no doer doesn't mean there's no doing. Just because there's no inquirer doesn't mean there's no inquiry. Just because there's no practitioner doesn't mean there's no practice. So true freedom means no fixation in the relative or the absolute. The interpenetration of both is really the infinite degree freedom that is the result of practice and good inquiry and dedication to living truth, regardless of what falls away in that process, which will be the reactive self, the sense of duality, the subject-object construct, and most importantly, the fundamental view, the view of views, the view that paradigms have any abiding reality. Reality is too free to be formulated in a paradigm or seen a certain way. So anytime you hear a fixed message, even if it resonates, but it feels fixed and rigid, you can be certain that there is some, albeit subtle, delusion operating. Because reality doesn't fixate. Fixation is of the thought process, of the mind. So we can get a little too excited about the prospect of non-doership and no self, because it's such a relief. If you've been in the desert a long time and you finally get some water, you want to drink a lot. But you can also fixate in that direction as well. You can fixate in an almost negative identity, an identity of no identities. It's a much more subtle fixation, but it does happen. There's a degree of freedom beyond that. It just keeps going. It's freedom all the way down. So if you notice any fixation in paradigm, view of spirituality, even the view of no view, then you know there's some finger on the scale still, some subtle self sense to investigate, a frame of reference or a view. So look into it, feel into it. Be willing to even throw your paradigm of no paradigms out. Then truth, living truth, carries itself endlessly onward, inward, nowhereward. That's the beauty of realization. It's the only thing that makes sense at some point. The only thing left to do.